Welcome to Healing Childhood Trauma, the podcast for millennial women who are ready to heal from the past. Here, we have the deeper discussions on emotional well-being and practical tips that will empower you to transform your relationships and underlying anxiety from insecure to secure attachment. I'm Lysandra, your host and psychotherapist. I'm a little bit obsessed with human development, deep conversations, and finding the lesson even in the most challenging of circumstances. I'm very happy to have you with me on this journey of self-discovery where we unpack the past and heal in the present. I'm going to record a bit more of a lighter episode because I'm very aware that with a lot of the content that I've been sharing on the podcast recently has been quite heavy. And obviously it's going to be heavy because the title of the podcast is Healing Childhood Trauma, right? And trauma can sometimes feel heavy. But with the heaviness of trauma, and especially with trauma-informed care and trauma-informed therapy, there also has to be space for lightness and for joy as well. And it doesn't always mean that working with trauma, we have to stay in the heaviness of it all. And so I just kind of wanted to, I suppose, just hold space for that and make you aware of that at the same time. So if I haven't said that explicitly before, I'm just going to make that very clear today in today's episode. And so I thought it would be nice to kind of go over a morning routine, which is sometimes what I do with clients who are just wanting to start their day in a better way, people who are just paying more attention to their emotional well-being, their physical well-being, and just wanting to kind of have a good start to the day as opposed to just starting by scrolling on your phone and binging half an hour of TikTok, right? There is a place for that, and I'm not against TikTok. If you're following me on there, you already know that I quite like it as a platform, and that's one of the main places that I also share content. So if you are on your healing journey, or you are in the therapeutic space, you're in therapy at the moment, or you're just being a bit more conscious about your emotional well-being and your wellness right now, I also kind of just want to caveat that when you are listening to these episodes, you have to kind of gauge where you are in your life as well, right? So if you are having like a really heavy day, or everything just feels like it's really stressful, you've got a lot on your mind, you're being very busy, you're going from thing to thing, you're not really able to kind of slow things down, everything is just feeling very fast paced. You also have to kind of be mindful of when you're listening to content like this, if we are talking about trauma. You also have to gauge where you are, like your nervous system. Like, do you feel like you are in a space to actually be able to listen to things that are talking about maybe painful experiences or things that get you to reflect on the past, especially if it's things that you haven't necessarily tapped into yet, or you haven't really gone into it in a very deep way? Is it triggering you, or is it helping you? And obviously I would love for you to listen to this podcast, right? But I don't want you to do that at the expense of your mental health or your emotional well-being. And that goes for anyone, and that goes for anything, whether it's this podcast, whether it is you binging other podcasts, listening to other content, you know, being in the wellness space. There also has to be space where you just kind of allow your nervous system to be at ease and to integrate a lot of the things that you're learning, because it's not just about consuming lots of different information. It's also about how does your nervous system kind of settle into that and get used to almost living it. And so, yes, it's absolutely great to make space for just getting to know yourself better, and whether that looks like journaling, whether that looks like the morning routine that I'm going to share with you just as some suggestions today. Like, don't be too caught up and wrapped up in this space of, oh, I'm on this healing journey, I need to stay in this healing space, I need to make sure that my morning routine is on point, I need to make sure that everything I'm listening to is perfect. Like, we are not striving for perfection. We need to live life at the end of the day as well. We need to make sure that we're also making space for joy. We are making space for rest. And I'm all about rest and being restful and kind of easing into your nervous system, as opposed to forcing your way through healing, forcing your way through productivity and powering through. That's not really my vibe. My vibe is a lot more slower paced. And to me, that is what is essential and most important in trauma healing. So hopefully with this episode just being about a morning routine, it doesn't mean that I might talk about something and it means that you're not going to be triggered, because who knows, it can tap into something. Our stuff can always come up at any point, which is kind of why also I tend to really not give trigger warnings unless I'm talking about something very specifically related to trauma that I just want people to be aware of before they kind of tune in. But obviously the whole podcast is about healing childhood trauma, so otherwise I'd have to give a trigger warning at the beginning of every single episode. But this is going to be a bit of a lighter one, just because it is based on morning routines. And sometimes clients can find it helpful to have a morning routine if they've got things like anxiety, or if they're just high stress, or they just want to have a better start to their day, especially if somebody is like an overthinker. They spend a lot of time in their thoughts, in their head. And so sometimes if you just have a morning routine, and it might not be something that you strictly do every single morning, but it might be something that you can consider in times of stress, and you're more aware that you just kind of need to slow things down a bit because you're picking up those signs of maybe your sleep patterns are a bit off, maybe it's harder for you to relax during the day, maybe you're snapping at people more, maybe you're a little bit more short-tempered. And so those can all be signs that you're not as restful as you would like to be. And so having a morning routine can just help in facilitating that. So I will just give you a few suggestions, and it's yours to kind of play around with. See what works for you, see what fits. Everything is always a suggestion, and it's a case of trial and error. Some things work better for other people. Yeah, and it's also very much like time dependent, because if you are a parent, for example, of young children, or you have responsibilities first thing in the morning, you're not going to have time to sit and do a laborious half an hour morning routine, right? So it's just bearing in mind that these are not rules. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just trying to find what works with your lifestyle and your routine. I think generally we tend to know that it's not a great thing to be on our phones first thing in the morning, but like most of us, your phone is literally just by the side of your bed, so it's very easy to just automatically pick up your phone and just start scrolling. But I would really suggest, and lots of research kind of back this up, that if you go from having a sleep state, so your brain waves are in a sleep state, and then as soon as you wake up, the first thing you do is to then pick up your phone, and then you flood your brain with lots of information. So whether it's like checking emails, going on social media, it activates your brain. Sorry, there's a lot of noise outside. It activates your brain, and it's almost like too much of a quick transition. You've gone from a state of sleep into a state of processing information, and it's almost programming your brain to overfunction. So in the mornings, our brains do actually need a slower start to the day, so that we're not overthinking constantly, basically, because it's almost like our brain is overworking, it's over processing. So if you are somebody who picks up your phone and you spend a lot of time on that, try to see if you can like cut that down. I just want to be realistic with that, because if you are somebody who does that very habitually, it might be unrealistic to say, well, I'm just not going to go on my phone anymore. It is a bit addictive, and I'm kind of just like normalizing that most of us do that. I pick up my phone first thing in the morning as well. But what I am a lot more conscious about is how long am I spending on the phone? What am I doing on the phone? So I'll try to make sure, for example, that I'm not like checking emails and things like that, unless I know that there's something specific that I'm looking for. Just being a little bit more intentional with phone use. So a morning routine could look like, instead of picking up your phone first thing, maybe you just kind of do a bit of a breathing exercise. And if you are adamant that it's so difficult for you to not pick up your phone, then maybe be more intentional with how you use your phone. So maybe instead of scrolling on a social media app, maybe you use it to do a bit of breath work, so like guided meditation. One of my favorite apps that I always recommend to people is Insight Timer, because there is so much amazing content on there from people who upload meditations and things like that. So you can pick anywhere from like a 5-minute meditation to something longer if that is your jam, that is your thing. And you can basically start the day with any kind of meditation that you want. You could search for anxiety meditation, for example, or you could even start for like morning gratitude. That might be a good way to start the day. So if you have the time and you don't have to spend really long having a morning routine, I would say anywhere from like 15 minutes to half an hour. I think anything more than that is probably excessive. But if you are, a single person and you don't have responsibilities first thing in the morning and you have the time to spend on yourself and really self-care it up, take your time with it, absolutely do that. But I think probably for most people, we don't always have that, or we don't necessarily give ourselves that time. If it's available to you, I think take it. Having that first morning start to your day and kind of planning how you're going to start your day, easing into it mindfully, I think is really going to set you up for the rest of the day to be more productive, if that is what you want out of your day, if that is something that you want. But if it's not about productivity and it's just more about checking in with yourself and wellness, then this slower start to your day, rather than going straight into the idea of productivity, or I have to do something, or I have to immediately be of service to others, that's just something to kind of be aware of when trying to build together your morning routine. So a basic typical morning routine could look like some breath work, maybe some time for journaling, some gentle stretches, or something that kind of just helps you to move your body, maybe a somatic practice, or something that just helps you to release some tension. So maybe like a progressive muscle tension release. You can probably just Google that to see what that is if you're not aware. But it's basically where it's like a form of meditation and a form of getting into your body again, where you really tense a specific part of your body. So you start from your head, for example. So you tense all the muscles around your head, and then you'll release those muscles. So it's called a progressive muscle release, and you basically just work down your body, tensing the muscles and then releasing. And so that's another way of being able to get back into your body, just activate different muscle groups and release tension. I know some people like to do like the cold plunging thing. So maybe you want to do like a cold shower in the morning. For me personally, it's too extreme. That's not my bag. If that is your bag, like, do your thing. But for somebody who is in a very highly stressed situation, for example, or somebody who has, your nervous system might be very wired and hypersensitive to things. If that is the case and you're quite an anxious person, I wouldn't recommend doing something as extreme as a cold plunge. That's almost too severe for your nervous system, and it can almost shock your nervous system as opposed to help your nervous system feel more regulated and feel more calm. So I personally would kind of stay away from the cold plunge situation unless that's something that you already do and you already know that it works for you. Some people find it helpful to include some affirmations in that process. These kind of things, you can always like YouTube some affirmations, something like that. So if you are using your phone, I think it's good to kind of be intentional with how you're using it. And so using it for something that's going to facilitate your wellness, as opposed to like mindlessly scrolling or mindlessly just doing things out of habit, as opposed to doing things without intention. So you can just kind of bear that in mind when you're doing a morning routine. So just finding your groove with what helps you to start your day in a better way. And sometimes we know sometimes what is the best thing for us to do in regards to our well-being. But we don't always do it because we're not machines. We're not designed to just function and do everything 100% right and always go to the gym and always, move our bodies and all the rest of it. We're not designed to function in that way. But how we're using the morning routine is to like integrate it in a way that feels healthy, and to use it in a way, like I've said before, to just that it works in your life. So if you have young children, for example, your morning routine can look entirely different. It might just be that you take a few breaths before you physically get up out of bed, and then you're kind of in the zone of, caretaking and whatever that looks like to get your kids up and ready for school or babies and whatnot. But it's just more about of what small act can you give to yourself to start the day. And it's especially important if you are somebody who is a caretaker or you are a giver and you are constantly outpouring into yourself. It's also a reminder for you first thing in the morning to think about, well, what do I need in this moment? How can I give something to me before I then start my day where I'm constantly outpouring and giving to others? So those are just a few things you can try. So there's meditation, affirmations, breath work, maybe some body movement, getting into your body, maybe releasing tension. I would also say maybe no phone for maybe the first 30 minutes. And if you are using your phone, just using it intentionally in the way that I described before, like maybe you're using it for an app to help with the meditation, you've downloaded Insight Timer, or maybe you're watching, an inspirational video on YouTube. If you are going to use your phone, just making sure that you're intentional about it. But preferably just give yourself that half an hour of allowing your brain to wake up naturally, as opposed to bombarding your brain with a lot of technology and information. And the journaling doesn't have to be for very long. The journaling can be like a short exercise, even just a few minutes. I'll give you just like 3 quick sentences that you can do that will just help you to kind of check in emotionally. And you can just write, how do I feel? And obviously answer that. You can journal on, what do I need? And then the third and final one is, what does my body need today? Sometimes it needs movement, but sometimes it just needs to be still. Sometimes it needs to be around friends, and sometimes it needs to be in a social situation. Or maybe sometimes it is literally just binging your favourite show and just being with your snacks and your blanket and just being warm, comfy, cozy. Maybe that's just what your nervous system needs that day. So it's just trying to not force your way through anything and just listening to more of what your body needs. And it could also be a good time to self-reflect and just see, what's the kind of day that you want to have. Just being more intentional in how you show up for yourself and how you show up in your relationships, and just doing things a little bit more mindfully as opposed to just going through the motions. Those are my quick tips for a morning routine. Mix it up, see how you go, try different things. Be a bit open-minded with what you're incorporating into a morning routine. It doesn't need to be every single day, but routine helps. But maybe just try it for a few days first. Try it for 3 days of the week, see how that goes, and then kind of increase. And then maybe it will just become a pattern that's ingrained that you don't even have to think about it too much. It's just a general way to how you start your day. If you have found this episode helpful, please do share it with a friend. I would love for you to rate and subscribe to the podcast so that you're aware of when the new episodes are dropping. We've recently hit a really good milestone. We've recently hit 5,000 downloads, and so I'm on the way to the next 5,000. So I am definitely on my way to hopefully getting 10,000 downloads before the end of this year. I know that I can definitely hit that with what I've done so far, but I can't do it without your help. So make sure you share this episode with anyone who needs to hear it, and let me know, give me feedback. I love hearing what episodes you prefer to hear about. It also helps me to plan future episodes and future content. So don't be shy to drop me a line over on Instagram and send me a DM and let me know what you think about the podcast and what you would love to learn more about in the DMs. Okay, so yeah, that's me, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you for joining this episode of Healing Childhood Trauma. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. Remember, healing is a journey and you are not alone on this path. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. And you can share this episode with a friend. Your feedback helps this podcast to reach more women who are ready to heal and build secure, healthy relationships and heal from the past.